Hi, everyone. Welcome to our celebration of the 50th anniversary of Planet Drum. My name is Greg Castillo. I teach at the College of Environmental Design at UC Berkeley. The reason I'm here is that I got connected to Judy through some work I did at the Berkeley Art Museum on curating the 2017 show Hippie Modernism, which I hope that someone here might have seen. And also I'm working on a book on counterculture called Spaces of Bay Area Counterculture that's forthcoming from the University of Minnesota Press. So let us start, if we could, with Kim Shook, who is going to do our land acknowledgement for us.
I know better than to touch this computer. I've done it before. Welcome. You're on the unceded ancestral lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who not only used to live here, but still do for varying degrees. And I wanted to say a few things about land acknowledgements. It's really easy, probably not this group, but it's really easy for people to hear them and not really understand what that means. So I'm going to say a couple things about that. What it means to be ancestral stewards of a place is to be intimately connected with all of the biome here. And the ongoing colonial efforts interrupt that sacred responsibility. I, for one, as a Cherokee person who's from 3,000 cultures east of here, really appreciate the opportunities afforded me from growing up and living in this place. And I just encourage everybody to be cognizant of where they are. So thank you, and let's be started.
Thanks, and I neglected to say that Kim Shook is a poet laureate emerita of San Francisco, a visual artist, and she has currently a show on the 6th floor, which I hope you will take a moment to see. Judy Goldhaft has been with Planet Drum Foundation since its inception. She's currently its director. I was delighted to find out that, like me, she's originally from New Jersey. Go Joyzy. She graduated from Cornell before coming to the Bay Area, where she got a degree in dance from Mills College. As a member of the San Francisco Mime Troupe, she performed, gave dance and movement classes, and fashioned costumes. Judy then became one of the Diggers, whose presence in the Haight became a staple of media coverage during the Summer of Love. The Beatles' press agent, Derek Taylor, wrote, "The Diggers were, in my opinion, the core of the whole underground counterculture because they were our conscience." A direct line connects the Diggers to Planet Drum. Peter Berg, a founding member of both groups, linked food and place through essays that promoted food regionalism. This was a wild and radical idea that's now completely mainstream. It anticipated and inspired the concept of bioregion, which Planet Drum Foundation, co-founded by Berg and Goldhaft in 1973, has advanced ever since as a movement to maintain and protect natural systems and as a guide for sustainability. Her concerns about water and water policies led to her to create a single-person performance piece, Water Web, incorporating movement and spoken word to celebrate water and describe our complex relationship to it. This is, in a sense, a bioregional theater performance that explores and illuminates human relations to natural systems. Without any further ado, please, Judy.
I don't know who that person was. I don't know. Anyway, I would like to thank everyone at the library who helped set this up and also set up the rotating exhibit that's on the 5th floor of Planet Drum Bundles, which were pretty outrageous and very beautiful. And Greg Hom, Megan Merritt, and Allison Wyckoff were really helpful from the library. And I wanted also to thank Kim Shook for doing the land acknowledgement, which I think is really important. And also I want to thank all the volunteers who helped. I'm going to mention them by name because I really want to honor them. Amy Burke, Carrie Crisp, Chris Carlson, Lisa Ruth Elliott, Joe Johnson, Mark Kasky, Gary Leung, Cheryl Meeker, Robert Maiska, Peter Menkini, and Jane Quatlander. Thank you for helping so much. And thank you to the panelists for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Greg Castillo for moderating. And thank you to all the audience because you actually made it here. Yay! So as you know, as you may have guessed, Planet Drum is an ecological educational nonprofit that was initiated by Peter Berg in 1973. What a long time ago that was. The 70s. The 70s, people barely know anything about the 70s anymore. There were a lot of very radical experiments in the 70s, and it was a very creative time. And people told Peter that at the time when he started Planet Drum, people said to him, "Your ideas are 40 years in advance of now." Well, it's 50 years now, and they've become mainstream ideas, so I guess they were right. Planet Drum is, mission statement says it's to provide an effective grassroots approach to ecology that emphasizes sustainability, community self-determination, and regional self-reliance. The question that Peter posed was, who are we, where are we, and what are we going to do about it? He used the word bioregion to describe where we are. Bio is life, region is place, a bioregion is a life place. And it's determined by the natural characteristics of the place, which also include people living in ways that are appropriate for long-term sustainability. Peter called it a geographic terrain and a terrain of consciousness. Planet Drum asks, do you know where you're at? So there was a lot of educational work in helping people figure out where they live. And the trick, of course, is how to do it. Planet Drum, as a master collaborator, used art, poetry, manifestos, maps, theater, humor, publications, workshops, walks, events to help people find their life place and enjoy it, and maybe even fall in love with it. So if you're going to fall in love with your life place, you really have to know everything about it, because when you fall in love with somebody, you want to know everything about them. And you could say it's been 50 years of exploring where we are, living here, where we live in the Bay Area, living in any particular bioregion. And it's actually a now-ever, timeless pursuit that is finding out where you live and figuring out ways to relate to the other species and places that are part of the place. It's more than just saving what's left, it's living as part of the web of life. I wanted to give you a couple of quick ways that things were in the 70s that fortunately are no longer happening. There was a man in Altadena, California. In the newspapers, he's listed as Zeke the Sheik, a strange way to talk about him. But he made compost, and he made an enormous compost pile, and he gave away compost by the bucketful for free for anybody that wanted to garden. Well, his compost pile was so successful and warmed up so much that it caught on fire. And so he was arrested for arson. And the giving away the buckets of compost for free they considered doing business without a permit. So that's why he was that's what the 70s was like. Also, closer to home, in Santa Clara Valley, if you planted native plants in your front yard instead of a green desert lawn, you could be arrested. It was illegal to plant native plants in your yard. Pretty an amazing time, you would say. Well, one more quick story is a story of how you do it, how you get involved with the bioregion. David Simpson and Freeman House, neither of whom can be here today, unfortunately, they moved out to Humboldt County, and when they got there, they looked around and they said, oh, we're at the mouth of a river that has salmon coming up it. I like to eat salmon. I think we better make sure the salmon are in good shape. So they started a project that had as the major things about it that they wanted to use the salmon that lived in their river. And at that time, and maybe even now, no one really knows why salmon come back to where they were spawned. So they wanted to use native salmon. They wanted the local people to be involved. And so they said, well, they worked out a way to do that. And they decided after about a year, it was illegal. It was illegal to get the eggs from the salmon that were coming upstream. So they also risked being arrested. They went out in the cold of the winter and caught the salmon and spawned them and did the whole thing and released salmon in the spring. And after they thought it would take about 2 years because the salmon go out into the ocean and then come back. At the end of a year, they said, well, maybe it'll take 5 years. At the end of 2 years, they said, well, maybe it'll take 20 years. And at the end of 3 years, they said, well, we'll be lucky if in 100 years we've replenished the salmon population that were here. So they were in it for the long term. And I have to say that the people that are up here on the stage and many of the people that are in the audience are also just amazing people that are into this place for the long term. So I say, let's hear your stories.
Thank you. Well, speaking of stories, our next speaker is Jerry Martien. He provided this brief biography titled Most Frequently Told Lies About Jerry Martien. So here they are. Jerry has worked as a bookstore clerk, a carpenter, a writing instructor, and a watershed organizer in the Humboldt Bay region for more than half a century. Under the aegis of Planet Drum, along with Jim Dodge and Freeman House, he was an editor of the bioregional newsletter Upriver, Downriver. He's the author of Shell Game, The Price of Life, and several books of poetry, the most recent titled Infrastructure, Dreams, Divinations, and Dispatches from the Underground. I know that last one isn't a lie because I found it online, and there's an online video of you reading it from the J Street Regulars Radio Hour, so please tell us whatever lies or truth you would like to know.
Thank you. Well, I have no idea what to say. Let me see, 50 years summed up, I remember none of it. But I thought, well, if in lieu of actual memories, I have a number of poems that I've written, and I brought some with me, which I think are what I would remember if I could remember. I want to start with, one that brings to mind one of a number of Planet Drum bioregional co-conspirators, dear friends, who are no longer with us. I think that's part of what we're marking here in this 50th anniversary. And this poem was written around 1973. No, I'm sorry, 1983. The decades slip and become lies or truth. You can't tell anymore. I read it at the last kind of bioregional event I read it at was at a burial service for Bob Watts, who worked for Planet Drum for many years and did many fine drawings for its pages. And this poem, I began writing poetry about the coast and the rocks along the coast near Trinidad, where I was living about the same time that bioregionalism seemed to be emerging. And the two things are impossibly and hopelessly confused in my mind. I can't tell with what was happening to me and what was happening to all my friends. But something was emerging. And it became a series of poems, all of them with the same title, The Rocks Along the Coast. They were once like us, like we were, a part of the continent. The ones close in get to keep their green, sometimes a tree, a few birds. Farther out, they wear away, and at certain tides go under. But in some opposite, equal justice, at a point not too close in, not too far, to even the balance, they're added on. Barnacles, limpets, blown sand, maybe a seed, incremental droppings. It could be the wearing down wins out, leaving them stranded in their own by the main body's day-to-day breakdown and retreat. Or they are thrust up and will remain by the sheer memory of the edge of the continent going over the edge of another continent. Do you remember? It has to do with love and how love has everything and nothing to do with islands. How it takes so much to be ocean and so little to be rock. There are no islands left along this coast. All the rocks have names. So I offer that as an introduction, and if it appears, if something reminds me of something I would have remembered, I will read another poem at that point.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce Remi Rubel. She is a pioneer environmental artist and a visual art instructor whose unique ability to see opportunity and beauty in everything manifests itself through her creative reuse of recycled materials. While Rubel was artist in residence at Recology San Francisco, she designed and orchestrated the production of a series of bottle cap quilts in collaboration with 45 young members of the San Francisco Conservation Corps, ranging in age from 12 to 14. The project exposed inner-city kids to the concept of recycling as an art form, and the completed 9-foot-tall mosaic is on permanent display at the Recology San Francisco office. Her trash formation abilities have been recognized by awards, grants, and residencies, including a collaborative project in the Tenderloin with Planet Drum's Foundation's Green City Project. Please.
Thank you, Greg. we're just going to switch over, Mike, to another presentation format. Cool. All right. Well, it's so good to see everybody here today. I even see a representative from the Senator Hotel who's here, David Grace, who can you wave to everybody? There's David, who helped significantly on making the project I'm going to be talking about today. And I have my cohort and my associate from my school that I teach at. So thank you both for being here as well, Anya and Carly. So I am honored to be here to celebrate 50 years of Planet Drone's existence. What a wonderful institution you've created, all the events that I've been learning about since this event that you've planned for today. And I'm going to be talking today about the project that I worked on with the Senator Hotel, which is a bottle cap quilt, as well as some of the work that I created prior to being found to work on that project, and some of the work that I've done since then. So as a professional artist, my artwork has always been about finding value in materials perceived as having little worth, and searching the ground for lost and forgotten treasures that I find there to turn into sculpture. I've been drawn to bottle caps, which you can see in the bottle cap jewelry up in the first slide there, since about the 80s, when I began a business called Remi Designs, where I transformed bottle caps into wearable jewelry and clothing, some of the clothing you will be seeing me wear today. And I also sold my work at museum shops and art museums and galleries and at street fairs. So I'd like you to raise your hand if you happen to be at either the Castro or the Polk Street Fair in the mid-'80s, where you might have seen a bottle cap jewelry booth. That would have been me. Anybody there? Yay! Wonderful. I'd like to talk to you about your memories of that. In the 1990s, I had a studio in the Dog Patch area of San Francisco, and I would pick up the roadkill metals that I would find on my way to my studio. The image on the right is of one of those sculptures. And then in 1990 and 91, I worked with the San Francisco Conservation Corps, which Greg mentioned already. And I, at that point, married my love of bottle caps with my found object and roadkill metals. This was the quilt that I created that is still up at 501 Tunnel Road if you get to the transfer station, where all of our trash in San Francisco goes to get sorted and recycled before it goes to the Altamont Pass, where then it is in its final stage of deterioration, we hope. And this is one of the quilts that was mentioned in Greg's presentation that I learned that he told me. So here we are in the marriage of the sculptural work and the bottle cap quilt. Now we've arrived at the invitation to work on a bottle cap quilt to permanently live at the Senator Hotel. And this is an affordable housing complex that's located in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. This was the project, the flyer that we used, that we put up all over the hotel, David being one of the people who was putting them up everywhere in the elevators, in the stairway, in the lobby, to get people interested in participating in this project. These were the goals of our project, which was to collectively create a welcome quilt with Senator residents, to celebrate residents' and neighbors' voices, to transform what is perceived as waste into value, to collaboratively work towards a common goal, and to build a sustainable recycling program at the Senator. And I'm happy to say that the recycling program is still effective and active at most of the floors at the Senator Hotel today. All right, so here we are with what does home mean to you? This was the concept of the whole quilt that we're working on, which we called home, the home quilt. And we centered Senator Hotel voices. We joined together to make a difference. That was our theme, and it was all about trash formation, transforming trash into new perceived things of beauty. This was the draft that was made, the drawing and the sketch of what the quilt would look like when it was done, with the focus on pride, ownership, collaboration, activism, and reuse. What we did was we put up signs all over actually I think they were buckets, maybe David remembers, but there were maybe containers where people could write things down and put those little slips of paper into containers all over the Senator Hotel so that they could actually include their words and their voices in the quilt itself. We also included photos, drawings, and there were activities. We had quilting bees where we sorted the bottle caps that had been gathered by David and maybe some other friends of his, as well as he went out to local bars and had bartenders putting bottle caps into containers to bring back for us. We had to sort all those bottle caps. Then we strung a whole bunch of bottle caps together, made holes in them, and made leaves out of scrap leather that we added into the vine, and then eventually we assembled it all. So that's the whole run through about what we were heading. Here's some of the images of some of the people that were working on the project. This is sorting the loot, which was the bottle caps were gold for us. And we have many of the children that lived in the neighborhood or at the Senator, and then that's our youngest artist, Annika, who was at most of our quilting bees. Too far? Yeah. So here we have the students, I work with kids at a school. These are the artists who are working on creating the artwork that we embedded in the bottle caps. And that's Fernando on the couch. He was one of my right hand, and David was my left hand working on this project, really holding down everything to draw people in for the project so that we always had people present at every one of our quilting bees. And on the right, you see Alice with Heather and her daughter, Sarah. They were looking through magazines to find artwork to put into the quilt. Now we have more participants. Maybe David remembers their names. I don't have their names that I could remember. These are some of the participants, and then in my sketchbook or my notebook, I actually wrote down a bunch of names, but I don't have the pictures of who was who here. But I know Julie was one of the Planet Drums volunteers, and she was very active in a lot of the quilt making. I actually wanted to read to you. I flew really quickly through one of the images, which was some of the text that was written by the Senator Hotel residents, and I'm going to read to you some of those that were on the concept of home. Oh, wrapping it up. 2? Okay. So I like my bedroom was something they said. Permanent sanctuary, privacy, life is good, paying the rent, home is heaven. Comfort, peace, and children, welcome to your new home, getting into clean sheets, Okinawa, Texas, schools, not jails. And I ask you, what would the quilt say today about home? Something I've been thinking about. So here we are. This is David Grace, who's going to hopefully get a chance to tell his stories. And I just have such thanks to him for participating in this project and being really one of the environmental activists that is still present at the hotel, at the Senator Hotel. Here's one of our quilting bees. Here we are again at a quilting bee. That's me in my younger form. There we are. Behind the scenes, we went back to my studio and we assembled all the pieces that we'd been working on and then glued them down onto computer circuit boards that were copper circuit boards, which then we brought back to the Senator and linked them together with S-hooks. And here we are back at the Senator. The vine you're seeing the vine there that was made with bottle caps. They popped all the holes into those, they strung them all together, and then they made the leaves to go into the vines with scrap leather. So here we are with a finished quilt, which you've probably been seeing in the reel that's been rolling here. Photographs of the participants in the quilt in the very center. I hope everybody can get over to the Senator Hotel and see this live, because it's quite beautiful. And here we are with the detail. And then here's us at the unveiling. There's somebody who hasn't been, this is Annika Fitzpatrick with David, and then Tammy Fitzpatrick, who also was one of the main coordinators at the Senator Hotel there. I am with Sabrina Merlot, who was, she was one of the grant writers that worked on Green City, the Green City program, and she was very active in the rooftop garden as well. So special thanks. I won't be reading these now, but I do want to mention that the City of San Francisco Recycling Program and the California Tamarack Foundation provided the funding for this project. Here is some of the work I've made since. This is called Textura. It was a quilt that was made with bottle caps with a lot of different materials embedded inside. Here's a detail of one of those quilts, all out of found materials. Here is a quilt that's up in Oakland. It was purchased by the City of Oakland. It's up in one of the administration buildings in Oakland. Detail of that. This is one of my more recent pieces, which was a bottle cap wedding dress, which was all embedded with white materials, all found at Scraps, Scroungers Center for Reusable Art Parts. If you haven't gotten there, definitely do that. And supposedly it's got a 9-foot train, so as you're walking towards the altar, your history is kind of being dragged with you as you go towards the altar. And some details in that piece. The reflecting back, the home quilt I collectively created with the residents of the Senator Hotel fills me with immense pride. Thank you again, Green City, Sabrina Merlot, Judy Goldhaft, and Peter Berg, David Grace, Fernando Cirillo, Tammy Fitzpatrick, who worked with me tirelessly to make my vision a reality. The materials in this piece were considered waste before they were given love and attention. Recycling has come a long way in 27 years. I only wish I could say the same about how we treat our fellow humans, especially those challenged by life. Each and every one of us has creativity. With creativity and effort, we can make beauty shine. Thank you.
Thank you, Remi. Now I'd like to introduce Peter Dodge. Peter is the author of the novels Stone Junction, An Alchemical Potboiler, and Not Fade Away, a road trip novel that the Cleveland Plain Dealer describes as reads like Kerouac's On the Road as it might have been written by Hunter S. Thompson. And Foop. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Foop? Fop. Fop. A transcendent tale that takes its title from the name of a 20-pound mallard with an iron will and a fondness for booze and romantic movies. It won international acclaim, the affection of multiple thousands of readers, and reached the New York Times bestseller list. And Dodge is as fascinating as his book. He used to be a professional gambler, which he reports was actually quite boring, and for a time was rumored actually to be the famously reclusive author Thomas Pynchon. A critic for the London Guardian reread Fup during the pandemic and wrote, "You'll just have to take it on trust that a story about a fat alcoholic duck made me simultaneously whoop with joy and want to cry." Please, Peter.
I first met Peter through Freeman House, who had at the time, a fishing commune in Trinidad, which Judy just read about the rocks off Trinidad. And then their idea was to trade fish for, other goods. I never saw a fish, actually, but it went pretty well. And then Freeman said, "You got to meet my friend Peter." And I sort of came to realize that this group was an outshoot of the Diggers, a San Francisco, I don't know what to call them, commune group, street performers that had, done Free in the Park and all that, and were sort of in a way my heroes. And I was just a middle-class college kid at Humboldt, where I started studying fisheries management and then took all the requisite biology and ecology courses, and then changed into something else, and became the first general studies graduate from Humboldt. That's another story. But so I came down with Freeman to meet Peter, and he was sort of a minor league legend in my mind. So we got together, and the first thing he said was, let's go for a ride. So we went out in the street, and I looked around, and there were a bunch of sort of old beat-up cars out there. And I've always been one to sort of, not judge, but to like use rolling stock as an index of character. So we got in one of the cars, I think it was a 51 Ford, and took off, drove down somewhere, I don't know where. Peter stopped the car, parked right next to a fire hydrant, jumped out, took the keys, threw them down the storm drain. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, it's a blind loaner. And I said, a blind loaner? He said, yeah. And then it sort of struck me that it might be loaned and nobody knew about it, or stolen or abandoned. And he had half a fleet of them on his street. So I went, Peter, you shouldn't park by the fire hydrant. Suppose there's a fire. And he grabbed me by the shoulders and said, the only man I ever trusted was Santiago. The only woman I ever loved was Pilar. I went, what the hell is going on with this guy? I actually thought that quote was from a book on the Spanish Civil War. So I tried to look it up today, but no dice. Santiago is in The Old Man and the Sea. And the only woman I ever loved was Pilar, I think, comes from Sun Also Rises. But Peter, as usual, had mashed them together. But to my mind, I went, this guy's got style. And I'm a sucker for style. And I found out later, he thought that I'd studied with Raymond Dasman, who was a preeminent ecologist. But I'd never studied with him. I'd just done an interview with him after the '64 flood about how the flood affected salmon reproduction. So I did it as a young fledgling journalist. So it was sort of a mistake for Peter to think I knew anything. But I did know a little bit about ecology. I know even less now. It's a difficult subject. But I was sort of taken by the energy. And I'd read a thing he did called Homeskin that I thought was pretty interesting. And I'd read Alan Van Newkirk, a Canadian ecologist, who was actually, that's the first place I ran into the word bioregion, which is a word I've sort of come to like, every time I hear it, I duck. Well, I mean, it's like so common, and it's inadequate in a way. So he wanted me, he said, how would you like to be on the board of directors? And I went, of what? And he said, Planet Drum, it's this new, organization. And we need to get a mailing permit or some damn thing. So I said, sure. I like the style. And as we came to know each other a little better, I always thought of Peter as not so much as an innovator, but as an incredible brain picker. He knew if he wanted information, he always went to the very best source, which I admired, of course. And also the times were, the times were changing for sure, but in some ways, I've been educated exactly the way the right wing would have you be educated now. America was the greatest country, exceptional in every way, never committed a wrong. So I was sort of the all-American boy when I started college. And then, of course, the civil rights movement, I said, what's this about? Blacks have the right to vote. Yeah, if you can pass a test, which I couldn't pass, by the way. And then Vietnam, the anti-war movement, women's movement, environmental movement. So the cardboard sort of fell away. And I saw that there was something at stake here about the American psyche and the direction of the country. So I was sort of proud in a way to be on the board of directors, although we never had a meeting and we never did anything I'm aware of. So, I mean, it was sort of fly by night. And Peter had a defiance in him that moved me in an incredible way. He wouldn't be pigeonholed, and he wasn't afraid of work. So it wasn't ever a rocky relationship, but I was doing something else and ran into Jerry and sort of fell into that community up there a little bit. So, I mean, that was sort of and in a way, I don't belong here. I think there's a lot more deserving people to represent Planet Drum. Even though I was on the alleged board of directors, there's a lot of people whose work was never recognized. I contributed a few articles to the Pulse. I went to some bioregional conferences where I had a ball mainly with Jerry. So I have no regrets about that, and I'm really happy about how the environmental movement is spread, because what's at stake is not so much humanity. I mean, who cares? But I think the future of the Earth as an organism is at stake. So I would encourage you to be as defiant as possible and stand up for what you believe in, like Peter. Thank you.
So being lazy, as long as we're at this end of the table, I'd like to introduce Nancy Morita. Nancy is the creator of the beautiful and formerly sold out, but now available in the lobby, Wild in the City poster. It contrasts the San Francisco that was with the San Francisco that we have today. And as an educational and consciousness-raising tool, it shows how completely we've reshaped the indigenous landscape over the past 250 years to suit a Eurocentric vision of what nature is supposed to be. Her heart is still in habitat restoration and in making friends with wildlife. Please.
Thank you. So, and I hope you'll, after this, go out into the lobby. I've brought some posters and a little display, and you can, if you're familiar with San Francisco, you can find your favorite places and see what they were like way back when. So, Judy, on this 50th anniversary of the founding of Planet Drum Foundation, Peter Berg and Judy Goldhaft's brainchild and now grown-up, multidimensional being, it is sweet to pause and look back at how my life and so many other lives and organizations have been stirred, nourished, kick-started, and woven so meaningfully together by their love, care, and belief in all of us. I first met Judy and Peter back in 1980 or so in their home office dream space at 451.5 30th Street in San Francisco. I'm not sure how I found out about them, but their network by then was already so well established and wonderfully eclectic that someone whose life they had touched must have sent me their way. At that point in time, I had an idea about making a historical ecological mapping of San Francisco. And I suppose I was looking for encouragement. Judy and Peter welcomed me in, listened to my ideas, and got suitably excited about them. I think I returned to their place several more times over the ensuing months, years that followed, and until one day Peter said, "Yeah, that's a wonderful idea, but are you going to actually do it, or are you just going to talk about it?" So after my initial shock and indignation, I realized that, yeah, I was absolutely right. And that was exactly what I needed to get going and make it happen. So Planet Drum became the fiscal sponsor for what came to be known as Wild in the City. And I'm sure that funding was helped along by their, once again, amazing network of friends and bioregional allies. Wild in the City, now with 2 poster editions and still going strong about 40 years later, has opened so many doors for me and for our shared message of the importance, sacredness even, of wilderness, wildness here in San Francisco. Peter, Judy, and Planet Drum were tremendously influential in Wild in the City's coming into being. Incidentally, Peter and Judy and Planet Drum joined me at the Exploratorium in April for a celebration of Wild in the City and related natural history and habitat restoration projects. And the event was attended by 150 people, standing room only, a testament to the longevity of these ideas. We were shocked, but it was great. It was not only the fiscal help and encouragement, but by my very thinking and understanding have been so enriched by Planet Drum and its network of bioregional allies. I can easily think of 20 friends and allies that I can trace to Planet Drum's introduction, who have both influenced my thinking and made the journey so enjoyable and worthwhile. Thank you, Judy and Peter. And I wish I had I brought some slides, but we couldn't get them on, so you'll have to imagine these pictures. By way of example, one day about 40 years ago, Judy suggested that I contact a friend of hers, Lauren Davis, and she offered me her mailing address. Right on. Lauren and I wrote initial letters to each other, then more, became friends, circumambulated Mono Lake together, adventured in several states, wrote, edited each other's manuscripts, and shared ideas and with appreciative zeal. Over all these years, Judy has an incredible eye and heart for seeing the essence of people and helping us make lifelong and inspired connections. Another lifelong connection, that with Jim Dodge, a former Planet Drum board member, as you've heard, who was the Reverend James Dodge, Doctor of Divinity, of the Ray-Vaughan Gospel Light Church of the Sun and Moon, presided over Michael Emery's and my marriage at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. And Jim also helped fill the little bags of popcorn that our guests would toss to bless our marriage. So you can see his creative thinking and willingness to jump in. Judy and Peter were invited by David Hankey to the first North American Bioregional Congress, affectionately known as NABC1. This was to be held in the Ozarks, and they invited me to join them as part of a traveling entourage, driving across the country and staying with friends and allies along the way. The Congress changed my life. I saw how 200 of us, passionate, devoted, opinionated, bioregional allies could operate on consensus, blow each other's minds in wonderful ways, and feed each other literally and figuratively every day of the 5-day Congress. Actually, Planet Drum didn't just get invited. Found out later. They were actually co-conveners, very instrumental in the development and blossoming of the event. By the way, this Congress was not a trendy, expensive, ticketed event to be seen at, but rather an all-in gathering of highly committed, brilliant, and inspiring bioregionalists sharing about what they know and love and do best. It was really a blessing to be there. One of the people on that NABC excursion was Bob Carroll, an actor, storyteller of the body, ecologically and scientifically, biologically informed, but also radical political performance to the spawning grounds, also known as Salmon Show. This was a pinnacle of fall down in the aisles laughing and cheering level of information sharing. Marvelous. Bob Carroll was one of Peter and Judy's dear friends, whom they helped to boost into the spotlight, to share with the community an amazing and soulful and always to be remembered message about our animal relations, as well as the politics involved. And when dear Bob Carroll became seriously ill with AIDS, Peter and Judy took him into their Planet Drum home for loving hospice. They honored him, and in doing so, inspired all of us. Judy came to visit me one day at a 100-plus-year-old one-room schoolhouse in West Marin where I was teaching at that time. We were both drawn to the 100-plus-year-old, actually a remnant of thousands of years old wildflower meadow there. And we laid down in it and shared stories. It felt like we were in a sacred bubble together, one of those elusive windows into dream time. Judy understands and connects with nature at a very deep and beautiful level, just as she does with us humans. And in our modern world, rife with ecological amnesia, hers is a rare and precious superpower. So here's to Judy and Peter, and to everyone else who's had a hand and heart in Planet Drum's sort of quiet, but nevertheless formidable 50-year success. And with best wishes for many more, with appreciation and love.
I want to, is this on? I want to let people know that the Wild in the City map that Nancy made has been used in schools and all kinds of places. It's an amazing tool to learn about where you are. It's quite amazing. And I also want to mention that my earrings were made by Remi, and they're cherry Coke bottle tops.
Circa 1986, I think.
So now we're going to move from one end of the table to the other. We're moving from the Bay Area to Michigan, and I'd like to introduce Stephanie Mills. She's a Michigander, I guess it's pronounced, and connected with Planet Drum in the mid-'70s, and ever since she has been grateful for the friendships, education, and inspiration it's bestowed. She's a longtime bioregionalist and author of In Service of the Wild, Restoring and Re-inhabiting Damaged Land. Also the books Whatever Happened to Ecology and Epicurean Simplicity, just to name a few of her half-dozen books about ecology and social change. She was also featured in the 2010 PBS documentary Earth Days. The journal Kirkus wrote in its review of In Service of the Wild, quote, "Fierce in her attachments and passionate in her writing, Mills tackles hard questions head-on. How do we reconcile economic growth with conserving, or better, preserving wild places? Taking side trips to the Himalayas, salmon runs in the Northwest, and most affectingly to Auroville, India, Mills shows how this hard and necessary work can be done." Please.
Gosh, it's so incredible to be here. Well, to be here at all, for starters, big gift, and to be among such company. I first met Peter when I was editing a very short-lived tabloid called Earth Times, spun off by Rolling Stone, and Peter and Freeman House, then diggers, came to my cubicle to demand that I turn over the centerfold for a digger paper. And I couldn't do it. I didn't think that Jan Winter would go along with it. I'd been hired kind of for notoriety at that point and informed that ecology was not as important as rock and roll. But we'll see, as a great ecological sage said, nature bats last. I'm told that I participated in a bunch of brunches with Peter and Judy, but that was a kind of a befogged time in my life. What I do know is that bioregionalism kind of blew up environmentalism for me. I worked at Friends of the Earth for a few years with a dear colleague who's here, and we were able to publish Re-inhabiting a Separate Country or republish it in Not Man Apart, the Friends of the Earth tabloid. And I remember also kind of trying to advocate for bioregionalism in an organization that was becoming a little Washington-centric. So there was this creative and valuable tension between the center and the real places across the land that bioregionalism encouraged and still does. And I think about this, kind of modest mom and pop shop with its genius and bohemianism and shoestring operation, and how the term bioregionalism has just become a tincture in people's thinking now. Anybody who's thinking about environmentalism has kind of got this notion of bioregion, whatever it means. And I wish that, in invoking the term, somehow people could have a sense of the spirit and the audacity and the daring do of those days. Nancy mentioned the first North American Bioregional Congress. That really changed my life in a big way. I met my ex-husband to be there and moved from the Bay Area to northern Michigan, where I now live and have since 1984. That extemporized, I'd like to read something a little more formal, if I may. Paying my heart's tribute to Planet Drum on its half-century has taken me straight to my love and respect for what Peter, Judy, and Freeman and their courage, brilliant imagination, and utter commitment to nature's primacy on planet Earth, and to their unyielding hope for human species kind to re-inhabit the biosphere one life place at a time. 50 years is a fairly long time, but what's issued from this outfit is durable goods. Planet Drum has been radical, sane, wild, and persevering. The bioregional vision is a template for something beyond permaculture or restoration or natural history or festivals, although these are all essential to the work. It's more, Peter said, than just saving what's left. Its invitation to a renewal of diversity, wholeness, and belonging in nature, not in general, but in a certain place, respecting its stories, landforms, watercourses, and biotic communities, has made Planet Drum's message compelling. Its existential meaning of habitat, the nudge to wonder at and engage with all species, our homies. Affiliation with Planet Drum and the bioregional movement led to, for me, to enlivening encounters with magical, charismatic, thoughtful individuals, flocks of terrific writers, QED, gifted naturalists, artists of every ilk, scholars and organizers and shamans, sages and facilitators and cranks, troubadours and comedians, people of First Nations, rainbow people, bohemians and cartographers, prairie and savanna and swamp people, city folk and monks, ecofeminists and rural fairies, homesteaders and craftspeople, all bodying forth possibility in their myriad ways. This is the kind of talent I like to run with, said Freeman House. The core truth animating the forerunners and ongoers is that Earth's bioregions are eminent, even altered severely, life places abide. Humans can be numbed by consumerism and a host of other grave misdirections. But evolutionary reality is that it's in our nature to wonder and risk, to know reciprocity with and care for all our relations. in essence, will always be animals seeking water, sustenance, territory, craving stimulus and medicine, touch, scent, color, vibration, repose, entheogens and herbal remedies, needing others, prey and predators, symbiotes and coevolutionaries. We are kindred, community. Planet Drum speaks that. Peter and Freeman left their legacies. Judy remains, works, awes with her grace, wisdom, and sheer mettle. Planet Drum endures and inspires. Its fed souls, gone mycelial, sparked wild pulses of life in a world straying towards zombified gray goo. It's encouraged life lovers, place knowers, sense makers, re-inhabitors, and faith keepers, has kept faith with watershed within watershed, kept faith with the seasons and the solstices, equinoxes, and phases of the moon. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude.
Thank you so much. Now, staying at the long end of the table down there, we have a kind of a late guest to our panel, a late addition, which is lucky for me because how in the world would I write a few words about someone who's a former digger, who wrote one of the most beautiful and at times brutally self-aware autobiographies I've ever read, who became a Hollywood actor, who was then a Italian menswear muse and model, and who is also a practitioner of Zen Buddhism. Like, how do you say that in a brief paragraph? Thank you, Peter Coyote.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. If I stop speaking in mid-sentence, it's because I promised Greg and Judy that I would not go over 10 minutes. And so when the second hand hits 12, I may just stop talking. You know, you never know exactly why the zeitgeist becomes what it is. You never exactly know why an upwelling occurs that creates the beat generation or the counterculture. Why millions of people at the same time get an impulse through their spinal telephone that they want something else. My quickest guess is that this latest one came from the testing of the atom bomb, that suddenly people realized that their life might very much be finite, they might not live to old age, and they were called on to express themselves in the most important ways as you might if you thought you were going to die. Bob Dylan said the atom bomb created rock and roll. People were not going to wait. So I was lucky enough to meet Judy and Peter in the mime troupe. They were both senior to me, and I was lucky to be tutored by such people and sort of recognized for what I could do and given all the rope I needed. And part of that rope was to encounter all the ideas that were floating through our intellectual lives at that time. One of them was environmentalism. And environmentalism seemed to always be concentrating on getting people out of the wilderness. The idea of purity seemed to be, if we can just get rid of the people, everything will just be fine. And that didn't make sense to me nor to the people that I was hanging out with. And from the mime troupe, we created the Diggers. And the Diggers came from basically two insights. The first was values that are not expressed in action don't exist. So if you believe in something, you better express it in what you do. And the second one was that we were artists. I come from a long line of Jewish socialists and communists, and I certainly never wanted to see a world where I would have to write plays about heroic bus drivers. I wanted to be in a world where I could be authentic and express the way I saw it. And those were the people that I found among the mime troupe. And those were the people that I found among the diggers. And I'll never forget that the first Thanksgiving dinner that I ever had with the mime troupe, I almost burst into tears because I realized that I had found my family. I was surrounded by people who I understood. And they're still my family. I may not see some of them, I may not like some of them, I may be cranky with some of them, but they're my family, and they have been for more than 60 years, really, more than 50. So at that time, environmentalism itself was under review. And people like Arne Ness and George Sessions and Gary Snyder and Paul Shepard and Peter Berg and Judy Berg were reconsidering what the environment was. The environment was not separate from us. The environment was not the scenery to where we were. We were all a part of it. We were, as the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh would say, we were in interbeing with the environment. We have umbilical cords connecting us to the sun, to the water, to the microbes in the soil, to the people performing the labors to make our clothes and food. And we needed expressions for it that were comprehensive and that were not anti-human, that were not virtue signaling. So at a certain point, I moved out into the country. I grew up on a farm for a lot of my life, and I moved out to Olima around the time, just before Peter and Judy started Planet Drum, but we were all in intercourse with one another, talking back and forth. And it seemed like such a bold idea to create a magazine that would create a forum. I mean, what is a drum? A drum is something that links everybody to a common pulse. It's an organizing tool, it's a dancing tool, it's an expression of ferocity, it's an expression of joy. And so all of these ideas of rethinking the environment I could find in these pages. Many were written by my friends, many came from other people. Gary Snyder was a mentor, an important person in my life. And as time went on, it began to expand to ideas of a kind of representative, democratic organism. The idea of a continental Congress, where each bioregion would have representatives, not from straight lines on a map that we call counties, but from bioregions. Collaborations of climate, soil, weather, culture, plant life, and animal life. We all know that LA is different from San Francisco, but most people don't stop to think that LA is high Sonoran desert, and San Francisco is fog, raven, deer, water, fur, all the way up to the Cascade Mountains. And within those, there are smaller microclimates of weather and temperature and cultural rearrangement. And the idea of becoming sensitive to that and actually expressing that in the values in your life. One of the early pieces I read in Planet Drum, I can't remember where, was that when settlers first came to restaurants in San Francisco in the 19th century, they were given huge bowls of shrimp to eat while they read the menu. That the San Francisco Bay was such a rich ecosystem of salmon and different kinds of steelheads and duck and goose and the wild food, a repository of wild food that we turned into a sump for chemicals. So these ideas, to me, have stayed current. They've stayed current to Judy. They stayed current to all the people that have been attracted into the magnetic field of Planet Drum. And they're more critical now than they ever were, because unfortunately unregulated capitalism is grinding it all into an unfertile mulch. And little by little, it's eating watersheds, it's eating species at an incredible rate, it's heating up the planet, it's heating up the oceans, it's killing the basis of the life with which our umbilical cords are plugged in. So I admired these people at the time. I've tried to model my life after the work that we did together and the values that we held. And I remain in debt to their efforts of translating all these ideas into physical objects, books, articles, papers, practices, ways of life that can be modeled. because if it's not modeled, it's not going from generation to generation. And it's too big a battle for us to even consider that we'll complete in this lifetime. So I would rather make a sandwich for a hungry person than I would give a speech to 10,000 people about hunger, because the sandwich can be modeled. Somebody can see me do it, they can make another sandwich, and they can give it away. So I'm basically here today to say a big thank you to Judy, as my friend, as my teacher, to Peter, to Jim, to Jerry, to Stephanie, and to all of you for showing up and taking the time. I didn't see anybody looking at a phone. I didn't see anybody checking their texts. And so once again, I reiterate, this is my family. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to have some time for testimonials from the audience. Is there a way to turn the house lights up a little bit? And there's our mic.
That was 8 minutes, Greg.
Would you like your extra 2? Or you can
No,
just
I'm
build
good.
more of them if you'd like. And please introduce yourselves, because I don't have bios for you.
Thanks. David Schooley. In 1969, the local people who lived in Brisbane, South San Francisco, Daly City, had just began to find out that they were about to put high-rises on top of San Bruno Mountain. And San Bruno Mountain was like a secret. Most people didn't even know the name of San Bruno Mountain. It was the Black Mountain. And here, this enormous event was about to happen, facing everybody all around. And step by step, that energy and care rose in a very special effort to the people living in those towns around. In the midst of that, around 1972 or 3, I guess, Peter Berg and Judy came to some of our efforts and fights on the mountain. And this was like a move on all our part, and moved to San Francisco to the incredible effort that was being faced on San Bruno Mountain. And over that period of time, the utter effort to build over that mountain suddenly got stopped by the people. It was like a great move in those days, and continues now. I remember that we had activities on the saddle. We had muscle gathering up in the saddle area, and meeting after meeting in Buckeye Canyon that made these moves and made the change and the idea to people around us. As the time moved on, among all of us, the battle to save continues. There's still enormous amounts of efforts to work on. It's now a park, a state and county park, and one of the efforts, for example, is there's a quarry area. The quarry is enormous and a beautiful botanical garden, if it could be saved. But other energies are in to face it. So it's, again, step by step as a battle on San Bruno Mountain. There's also McLaren Park and San Bruno Mountain needs to be a trail, an actual move between them. So this is on its way. Levinson, another area by Geneva and Daly City, that area could be a new park entrance. There's other areas too, like there's no real proper connection to Sweeney's Ridge. That should happen. Anyway, there's a lot of efforts to be done on the mountain. In the meantime, of course, is restoration. an unmoving effort for removing non-natives and maintaining an incredible survival of what's still there, of a wilderness that most people don't realize that it was San Francisco's garbage filling the bay at the base of San Bruno Mountain, that San Bruno Mountain was not destroyed. People stayed away. Nobody built there because it was stench by the bay. So it's inside, outside of ourselves and what we're doing. In the meantime, there are hikes and any activities. I hope more people will come. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to Jim Griffith and Manira Kadri, who are reading some tributes from people who are not here.
This is from Giuseppe Moretti. He is an Italian. He is obviously, and he is also an organic farmer in the Po Valley. And he has been writing a little bit, not a whole lot, but he asked me to read this little bit from him. After Terra Nova, the monthly journal of the alternative, gave up on pursuing the bioregional idea in Italy, I found myself alone insisting on this proposal of change. Nobody knew me at the time, late 80s, but also because working on my father's small farm absorbed all of my time. And if we add to this my innate shyness, which meant that even in those few bioregional camps in which I participated, my voice was hardly heard. Notwithstanding of that, my conviction of the validity of the bioregional proposal was such that I really didn't want to see it abandoned. And that is how the publication of Lato Selvatico began, a modest newspaper, written partly by hand, partly with a simple old typewriter. It was 1992. And sent for free to a few targeted addresses. That was literally a stone dropped into the pond. And what a great idea and advice. Keep throwing stones into the pond.
This is from Carol Miriam Goldberg. She sent the letter 2022. We were holding hands in a circle, 200 or so of us, singing Leonard Cohen's song, Suzanne. It wasn't a well-known song, but a very well-loved by me, so I followed the music. I looked across the circle and saw Peter and Judy moving with elegance and panache. In time, I was hugging Judy and looking deeply into her beautiful eyes. I was holding Peter's hand. I was in love with everything and everyone, at least for a while. But let me be honest, I was also, for the first time in my life, on acid. Most others around me probably were too. The drugs were a mistake for many of us, and surely they were meant to derail what we were really there to do and be. But eventually I would find my feet and breathe again in love and with this movement, these people, this earth, that interbeing and family. But throughout the Congress, there was something about Peter, there was something about Judy, and there was everything about Planet Drum. Its dreams that permeated and shaped all we did. Peter's amble towards Continental Congress, a manifesto written in 1976, was the blueprint beneath the house of the Congress we built in the wild. She lifted her arms, her loose blue kimono rippling around her like water as she swirled and spiraled down on the stage. We were in San Antonio, Texas, Just past dark, most of us at the gathering stood and sat in the cooling air watching Judy do the water dance, something she developed in a more ancient dimension and returned to us at each bioregional gathering. This time, I watched her with new eyes. We're all made of water, she reminded us in a language beyond words. Yes, we are. My body, my daughter's body, your bodies. Then I go to, let's see, she sang back to me in a quiet of the still air right before the wind of the storm makes its way through the crowd and open the space around us. I saw Peter and Judy again in 1984 at the first Continental Bioregional Gathering they called the North American Bioregional Congress. The men at the Congress took turns sewing the new bioregional quilt together, each square made largely by women throughout the continent. Sometime in the late 1990s, I was in San Francisco for a drama therapy conference. San Francisco is always crazy expensive when it came to hotel rooms, so I stayed with Peter and Judy. You're moving differently. Something has changed you, Peter told me one morning at their kitchen table over breakfast. He sees these things, Judy added. He was right. Peter died too soon, and yet over 11 years ago, a mere 73 years in age, although much older in bioregional time, given his still unholding legacy, he was the original raconteur, a performer of space and place, a visionary, a curmudgeon. He was fearless and loving, present, a bit, full of life. He and Judy started the Planetarium Foundation decades before we knew what was coming, but surely on the basis of what was on its way. Okay, thank you.
And while we're here, perhaps I can pass the microphone to Ocean Berg. Yes.
Thank you. I actually wanted to speak. I grew up, obviously, in Planet Drum Foundation. It was downstairs to me, and I'm Judy and Peter's daughter. Sure. But what I actually really wanted to speak about was how much fun Planet Drum Foundation was as an office to work in. We were full of vibrant people. Matt's here. Sabrina Merlot was a joy to work with. Deb Hubsmith, who is no longer with us, but was an incredible thinker and pioneer for bike riding safety. And we enjoyed each other. We enjoyed the work we were doing. We were just immersed in this think tank of ideas. And we also had these killer, awesome lunches that Judy would construct once a week. We would have staff lunch and hang out and eat lunch together and just really enjoy each other's presence. So I just am so grateful that that was part of my childhood and part of my adulthood as a worker at Planet Drum, and to just be so engaged in a vibrant office with amazing parents and thinkers. Thank you.
I'm not on the list, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Thomas Morris, and years ago I had the pleasure of either designing or printing most of your work. And how that came to pass, let me put on my track shoes and try to run this by you. I started as a dropout artist from the Institute in Oakland and started doing rock and roll posters and newsletters for entertainment industry and radio, when by complete chance I ran into a mentor the dearest friend I ever had. I don't see Ken Oliari here, but he had wind of a vacant print shop that had gone derelict in Oakland. And we went down, and there was a printing press and all the equipment sitting dormant. And we read the books and learned how to print and decided we would print my rock and roll posters and then use the money to buy resources to print for free. And we started with anti-war posters, poetry books from Berkeley poets. And then one eventful weekend, a posse of weirdos showed up. It was Peter Berg and Marty McLean and Howes. And the goal was to start on Friday and leave Sunday night with a very special publication. It was going to be a handout program for the theater group to entertain the prisoners at the Atascadero prison of the criminally insane. It was an enormously creative jam session, unlike anything I've ever experienced. People called Mr. Berg verbal egotist. I mean, he had enemies as many as he had allies. And these days we would call him an influencer because he influenced people. He influenced me. I changed my life. I became a digger. We started Jelly Roll Press, and we ran for years. We printed everything, and even when the place burned down, we took the equipment and started a free bakery in Oakland, where a block away was the Black Panther headquarters, and we had the printing press up front. The black piece up that went by moleskin, I forgot, Judy, what? Yeah, that one. Yeah. Peter showed up with a skid load of black paper and said, I want to print something. I mean, how do you print on black paper? I mean, I looked it up. I mixed some opaque white with some silver metallic, and we did it, and it was an experience added on to many that made my formula as a creative person, which eventually got me to turn legitimate, got married, had some wonderful kids, and started a studio in Berkeley called Sharpshooter Studios. And it became incubator for the creative East Bay folks. I mean, people showed up. We just had enormous resources available, people that brought materials for us to use. And then one day, again, Peter shows up with Judy, and the idea of Planet Drum was formulated with the Raise the Stakes publications. I solved problems with finding ways to get things done with print. And with Judy's mindful budgeting, we found out ways of getting quarterly newsletters done. Most all of the work that was shown in the preview was done on small presses with whatever paper was available. I'm going to wrap this up with one fairly unique quick story. That is, the word liberation back then was very different, right, Peter? It meant if you had it in your hands, it was free and was yours. And there was this machine. You see, to do good work, you had to have camera-ready copy, which meant your type had to be something that could be reproduced. And somebody brought in a liberated IBM Selectric. Oh my God. With those little aluminum balls. And every time you want to change a font, Judy's laughing, you got to, bold, italic. And if you made a mistake, you got to start over again. But that IBM Selectric, if most all of the work that you saw up there was from an IBM Selectric, and it changed. I mean, you didn't have to go out and spend. There were no typesetters. There were no computers. There were no machines that that could be affordable for us to get type set in columns, and it just was something that reflected on how fast we migrated into the world of becoming publishers and innovators, and quite frankly, it's something I'm still doing. I'm fortunate to be working as a designer at a sign shop even today. So thank you, folks.
Hi there, my name is David Schmidt, and I'm the author of a book called San Francisco Bay Area Environmental History, Biography of a Bioregion. This book has not yet been published yet. It has 20 chapters, each of them on a different aspect of the San Francisco Bay Area's land, waters, history. It's all about industry, native tribes, wildlife and hunting, fisheries and fishing, invasive species, earthquakes, fires, floods, droughts, mining, oil and gas, logging and forestry, agriculture, and a lot of other stuff. I would like to talk, as soon as we finish this program, I'd like to talk to anybody who has ever had a fruitful relationship with a publisher so that I can get this thing published. Because I've been working on it for 25 years, ever since the Planet Drum newsletter came out with an article that I published with a brainstorm about this that was inspired by Planet Drum publications. So, yeah, 25 years in the making, and I need contacts with publishers, so thank you very much.
We have time for a couple more, so yeah. If you could keep them brief because we're under some hot stress.
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Chris Vasquez. I'm one of the volunteers for this event. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your dedication and determination for being in this work for the long haul. I previously had a career in corporate sustainability, and by the end of my time there, I was very disillusioned with that work. That's because I had realized that there was no amount of tweaking around the edges of a broken economic system that's fundamentally incompatible with the limits of the biosphere. So I experienced this as a kind of personal crisis, and I began reading a lot of books to figure out what to do next. And it was through reading Daniel Christian Wall's book, Designing Regenerative Cultures, where I found this concept of the bioregion, and it immediately sparked for me. And so now I'm in a PhD program studying it. But it didn't take me long after that to begin volunteering for Planet Drum. And if you've enjoyed the stories that you've heard here today, I want to direct you to Planet Drum's website, which is planetdrum.org, where you can check out a tab that's on the 50th anniversary, and there's about 40 different stories from people who've participated in this movement. So thank you so much to Judy, Peter, and everyone here today in Planet Drum for the inspiration, and congratulations on 50 years.
John Diamont, I've been with this movement since, I don't know, 72, 73. Yes, I know. And others. I've been on a tear, as some of you know, that the next medium to communicate what we're about is the vast demographics and the huge economic engine of interactive, what we know as games. That's what I just want to leave you with. I do want to have a shout out to Zach Stewart, who's not here. For some of us, he's the godfather of much of this. And also to the late Bonnie Shirk, responsible for greening the park, Bryant Park behind the New York Public Library, co-responsible for the Mission Creek restoration, and in between ran a place called The Farm, which many of us used for many activities, rehearsals, and so forth. I urge you to go to the new farm at 10 Cargo Way, sfnewfarm.org, which has revived a lot of that crossroads performance space. So again, I'd like to leave you with the next medium, after dance and song and theater and print and publishing, I think is this interactive medium so many people participate in around the world and feed with a lot of money, of which a tiny trickle coming to Planet Drum Foundation would make this work endure. If any of you here have had a similar thought that bioregionalism should be a game or in the game sphere, please come and see me afterward. I have 2 cards. They contain about 8 or 10 names of people, godfathers of and practitioners of the game space. And if you resonate with those, then we have something to talk about. Thank you.
I think we have time just for one more, and your hand was up before.
Just for a moment, I would really like to ask, not only because I've known him since about 1957 or 8, that, and it's such lovely to hear Jerry read earlier, I wonder if we could have a closure with Jerry reading a poem or two. Jerry Martien.
Yeah, I think this is a 5-minute poem. It's a poem about Freeman House, whose essays I've been collecting and are about to be published at the end of this month, which I think is an auspicious occasion that it seems tied to this occasion, that marks some kind of a cycle in the story of bioregionalism and Planet Drum. Trip without a ticket. As inhabitants working to restore natural systems, we will learn to see the healing processes and to align ourselves with them. Freeman House, 1938, 2018. 5 years from now, he will write those words, but not today. The healing begins with hurt. It's a Sunday morning. Freeman and I are out in the garden among the poppies. Little beads of milk ooze from razor cuts in the seed pods. We lick our fingers as we work. We got a good start on the windows yesterday. I drove out from town early. We cut out wall studs, framed in some of the new headers and sills. We haven't cut through the siding yet, but we can already envision morning sun coming into this barn that he and Nina have made their home. Then we congratulated ourselves and finished a bottle of Jameson. When we're done with our labors among the poppies, I walk up the hill to my van. I dream I'm on a bus. It's headed uptown on a wide avenue somewhere above the Mattole Valley. I'm sitting up front in the seat across from the driver, no other passengers. Because of the poppies, it's hard to keep my eyes open. We live in a world of pain. Most of us soothe ourselves with trash culture and unwarranted hope. But some people have to immerse themselves in the hurt. The relief is on the other side. The windows are framed with full-dimension fur that was cut and milled years ago. It's like rock. The bent 16-penny galvanized nails are as hard to pull out as they are to drive in. Then the next one bends. It's never the hammer's fault. We met one winter on a little organic farm in Elk River, not far from where I live now. I was getting lessons in how to grow things while going broke. Freeman and his friends showed up and said they had a boat in Trinidad and wanted to trade fish for vegetables. Headscarves, earrings, they looked more like pirates than fishermen. They were diggers. They didn't have any money. They said they didn't believe in it. It was hard to tell which came first, the not having money or the not believing in it. This is how pain leads to new thinking. Now it's summer, half a century later. The Mattole is just a trickle. The valley's hope for the return of salmon is swimming in 2 tanks down by the creek. Springs are going dry. David and Jane, old digger friends and neighbors just over the ridge, they called in a water witch, but the willow didn't bend. Dynamics of recovery won't appear for another decade. Totem salmon is still 15 years away. David says bioregionalism is a family pretending to be a revolution. While we pounded and pulled nails, we talked about sanity and place. For most of a day, we felt less crazy, not so lost. Afterward, sleeping off the whiskey in the moonlight, a dry wind blowing through the open doors of the van, dream after dream brought it back. Crazy, lost. My eyes are closed, but I can see myself in the bus driver. He reaches back to touch my forehead with his thumb. His other hand is on the wheel, but he doesn't need to look where we're going. He makes some kind of sign on my forehead, says a few words I don't understand. Then the bus stops somewhere high above the valley. This is where I get off. The next time we met, he and Jerry Gorslund had just published Totem Salmon, a manifesto in a Planet Drum bundle. He'd quit fishing, was living in Noe Valley, sharing the basement with Planet Drum's editorial offices. Trading labor for rent, he was laying hardwood flooring over its concrete. We walked across the Mission down to a little cafe in China Basin. Like the old waterfront built on post-quake rubble, it was about to be buried under concrete and capital investment. After lunch, we wandered between the ruin of the past and the ruin of the future. A year or so later, when I was in the city again, we had dinner on Potrero Hill at the apartment of this nurse he had met. Another year or so went by. Then one afternoon, he and Nina came into Northtown Books in Arcata, where I worked. He had both arms in full casts. High up on a ladder, remodeling this barn they'd bought in Petrolia, he'd taken one of several life-altering flights. Now he couldn't feed or dress or even scratch himself. If anyone ever needed a nurse, he must have foreseen this pain from a long way off. Be prepared, we'd been told as kids. Freeman had been an Eagle Scout. As I'm getting off the bus, the driver again says something I don't understand. It's like he's using words from before humans found language. Or maybe it's the language we use when the words are gone. I think he's talking about the bus fare, so I offer him $1. He laughs. Money is ridiculous. Without having to actually say the words, he says, "It's been taken care of." We got in another full work day. Then the next day, Freeman quit early so he could host a dinner and poetry reading down by the river. That evening, he barbecued ribs and kept the fire going long after the sun went down. The food, the introduction to the poetry, all delivered with his usual grace. But then it was dark, and the dinner guests were drunk and rowdy. It was the poet's first little book of poems, and he couldn't even see them. But Freeman came up with a flashlight. Aaron held it, and the reading went on. Even little Laurel, his and Freeman and Nina's baby daughter, stayed awake to the end. Next morning, we drove the last nail, and Freeman chainsawed the siding out of the new framed windows. He said, "Poetry is the critical and necessary reporting of what happens in our surroundings, letting in the light, letting out the pain, letting you know wherever you are, when the bus gets to your stop and you're wondering about the ticket, it's been taken care of." Thank you.
So we're a little over our time, so thank you very much to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here. And if we could now move directly to the lobby for any continuing conversation.